In the wizarding world, almost all characters are connected by blood, marriage, or ancestry, often without ever realizing it. It's a lot like the Star Wars universe, but without the awkward brother and sister makeout sessions. Although there is quite a bit of cousin lovin', but more on that later. Ancient houses collapse, quiet families survive, and rival bloodlines intersect in unexpected ways. This video breaks down every major family tree, step by step, to show how the wizarding world is far smaller and more entwined than it looks. The earliest confirmed ancestors in this family line are the three Peverell brothers, Antioch, Cadmus, and Ignotus Peverell. Antioch is killed shortly after creating the Elder Wand. Ignotus escapes death with the invisibility cloak. Cadmus survives long enough to pass on the Resurrection Stone, which becomes the single most important object in his bloodline. Cadmus Peverell's descendants eventually merge with the line of Salazar Slytherin, one of the four founders of Hogwarts. After a few rounds of Quidditch and chill, the combined lineage of Peverells and Slytherins produces the Gaunt family, who are explicitly identified as Slytherin's last living heirs. The earliest named Gaunts are Gormlaith Gaunt and her sister, Rhiannoch Gaunt. Rhiannoch Gaunt marries William Sayre, a wizard, and they have a daughter named Isolde Sayre. Gormlaith Gaunt murders Rhiannoch and William in an attempt to seize Isolde and preserve the bloodline. How an aunt and a niece are supposed to continue a bloodline is anyone's guess. Maybe Hogwarts should worry less about teaching herbology and more about teaching basic anatomy. Isolde escapes to North America, taking Salazar Slytherin's wand with her. She later marries a no-match named James Stewart. Together, they have twin daughters, Martha Stewart and Rhiannoch Stewart. They also adopt two orphaned boys, Webster Boot and Chadwick Boot, bringing the Boot family into the wider Slytherin-descended network. Meanwhile, the British Gaunt line continues separately. A Gaunt named Corvinus Gaunt is born with the ability to speak Parseltongue. His mother hides him, raising him among Muggles. This attempt fails. Corvinus dies, but his existence confirms the bloodline's ongoing instability. Generations later, the family produces Marvolo Gaunt, a violent, impoverished pureblood wizard obsessed with ancestry. Marvolo has two children, Morphin Gaunt and Merope Gaunt. Morphin assaults a Muggle, presumably after exclaiming, "It's Morphin time!" and is imprisoned in Azkaban. Merope, abused and neglected, uses a love potion to marry a wealthy Muggle named Tom Riddle Sr. Merope becomes pregnant and stops administering the potion, leaving Tom Riddle Sr. to abandon her. Merope gives birth to a son she just happens to name Tom Marvolo Riddle, an anagram of I am Lord Voldemort, and dies shortly after. Tom Riddle Sr. later marries a Muggle woman and has no further magical descendants. Tom Marvolo Riddle grows up in a Muggle orphanage. He later adopts the name Lord Voldemort and murders his father, Tom Riddle Sr., like a modern-day Oedipus. Thank God his mother was already dead at this point. Little Lord Moldavort then kills his grandparents, Thomas Riddle and Mary Riddle. Voldemort has no children and no acknowledged heirs, ending this branch of the family entirely. This completes the full Peverell, Slytherin, Gaunt, Riddle line. The Potter family line begins with Ignotus Peverell, the youngest of the three Peverell brothers. Ignotus is the original owner of the invisibility cloak, and unlike his brothers, he lives a full life, marries, has children, and passes the cloak down through his descendants. This object never leaves the family, moving strictly from parent to child. Several generations later, Ignotus's descendant Iolanthe Peverell becomes the last recorded bearer of the Peverell name. Iolanthe marries a wizard named Hardwin Potter, at which point the Peverell bloodline continues under the Potter surname. The invisibility cloak passes into the Potter family at this exact moment, establishing the Potters as one of the few wizarding families with a direct, unbroken magical heirloom. One of the earliest named Potters is Linfrind of Stinchcombe, a well-known and widely liked wizard named the Potterer by his neighbors. Most likely because it's impossible to say Linfrind of Stinchcombe with a straight face. Linfrid, or should we say the Potterer, uses his talent for potion making to develop remedies that later evolve into commercially successful potions. His work lays the foundation for the Potter family's quiet financial stability, long before they are considered prominent. Generations after Linfrid, the family produces Henry Potter, Harry Potter's great-grandfather. Henry Potter serves on the Wizengamot and becomes notable for publicly supporting Muggle rights during a period when doing so is deeply unpopular. His stance causes the Potter family to be quietly excluded from lists of respectable pureblood families, a label they never attempt to reclaim. Henry Potter's son is Fleamont Potter. Fleamont significantly increases the family's wealth by perfecting Sleek Easy's hair potion, selling the company at a massive profit. He marries Euphemia Potter and the two struggle for years to have a child before finally succeeding later in life. Apparently, like most modern conveniences, the wizarding world doesn't have IVF treatments. Still, I'm kind of surprised there's no pregnancy spell, like Brego Magego, for infertile wizards and witches. Their only son is James Potter. James inherits the family fortune, the invisibility cloak, and the Potter disregard for blood purity politics. He attends Hogwarts, befriends Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew, and later marries Lily Evans, a muggle-born witch. He also bullies the crap out of a nerdy goth student named Severus Snape, but apparently he gets a pass because he's the main character's dad. James and Lily have one child, Harry James Potter. Harry inherits the invisibility cloak directly from his father, making him the final known descendant of Ignotus Peverell. This places Harry in the same extended ancestral family as Lord Voldemort, though through an entirely separate branch. Still, there's enough of a family connection between the hero and the villain to remind us that, yes, J.K. Rowling did get most of her ideas from Star Wars. James and Lily are murdered by Lord Voldemort, leaving Harry as the sole surviving member of the immediate Potter family line. The Evans family is a fully non-magical family originating in the Muggle world. The parents are Mr. Evans and Mrs. Evans, whose first known child is Petunia Evans, followed later by Lily Evans. There is no magical ancestry recorded in either parent, which makes Lily's magical abilities spontaneous rather than inherited. I'm sure someday Rowling will say it's because Lily had a really high magichlorian count or something. Petunia Evans, the elder sister, grows up resentful of Lily's magic after being rejected from Hogwarts herself. She later marries a Muggle man named Vernon Dursley, who works as a director at Grunnings, a company that manufactures drills. Vernon's parents are not named in canon, but his sister, Marge Dursley, is repeatedly referenced and plays a minor but unpleasant role in Harry's childhood. Petunia and Vernon have one child, Dudley Dursley. And boy, is that an accurate name. Dudley is entirely non-magical and grows up spoiled, protected, and aggressively encouraged to see Harry as inferior. A true dud in every way.
36, but last year I had 37!
Dudley later marries and has children of his own, though their names are not provided in canon. Rowling confirms that Dudley's children are magical, meaning that Evans' bloodline eventually produces witches and wizards again through Petunia's branch. Lily Evans, the younger sister, is a Muggle-born witch. She attends Hogwarts, where she is sorted into Gryffindor and becomes close friends with Severus Snape before later marrying James Potter. Lily has no magical relatives aside from her son. Her parents die normal Muggle deaths before the start of the main series. When Lily and James are killed, Harry is sent to live with Petunia, Vernon, and Dudley Dursley, placing the final Potter heir entirely within the non-magical side of the family. Wait. Harry's true lineage is hidden by sending him to live with his non-magic aunt and uncle? Wow, J.K. Rowling is really lucky that George Lucas isn't the kind of guy who sues everybody. This completes the Evans-Dursley family line and establishes how a purely Muggle branch becomes permanently tied to the central magical bloodlines of the wizarding world. The Black family is one of the oldest documented pure-blood families in Britain and is formally titled the Noble and Most Ancient House of Black. The earliest recorded members are Phineas Black, Ursula Black, Belvina Black, and Lycoris Black. Of these four siblings, only Lycoris Black produces descendants, meaning the entire surviving Black bloodline runs through a single branch. No pressure. Lycoris Black marries Magenta Crab, making her Magenta Black, a horrible color combination, and linking the Black family to the Crab line. They have 3 children, Cygnus Black I, Arcturus Black I, and Belvina Black II. Cygnus Black I marries Violetta Bulstrode, bringing the Bulstrode family into the Black lineage. They have 3 children, Pollux Black, Cassiopeia Black, and Marius Black. Marius Black is a squib and is burned off the family tree entirely, because nothing says loving family like ritual erasure. Pollux Black marries Irma Crab, which, if you're keeping track, is kind of icky. Talk about keeping it in the family. They have 2 children, Walburga Black and Alfred Black. Amazingly, neither child is born with flippers or a second head, despite their parents' inbreeding. Alfred Black later supports his nephew financially and is posthumously blasted off the tapestry for that crime. Walburga Black marries her cousin, Orion Black, because apparently one level of inbreeding wasn't enough. They have 2 sons, Sirius Black and Regulus Black. Both siblings again managing to come out without any major birth defects, despite the Black gene pool now being more of a gene puddle. Sirius Black rejects the family ideology, including its penchant for in-family mating. He attends Hogwarts, is sorted into Gryffindor, disowned, imprisoned in Azkaban, escapes, and dies without children. His line ends completely. Regulus Black joins the Death Eaters, becomes disillusioned, attempts to destroy a Horcrux, and also dies without heirs. Both male Black heirs are gone within one generation. Parallel to this branch is Cygnus Black II, who marries Drella Rosier, expanding his family's breeding pool and linking the Blacks to the Rosier family. They have 3 daughters, Bellatrix Black, Andromeda Black, and Narcissa Black. Bellatrix Black marries Rodolphus Lestrange and has no children. Andromeda Black is disowned for marrying a Muggle-born wizard, Ted Tonks. Narcissa Black marries Lucius Malfoy, producing Draco Malfoy, ensuring the Black bloodline survives only by abandoning the Black name entirely. This completes the full Black family tree, including every named member recorded in canon and official supplementary material. The Malfoy family is an old pure-blood wizarding family whose power comes less from ancient myth and more from consistency, wealth, and timing. The earliest confirmed ancestor is Armand Malfoy, who lived during the reign of William the Conqueror and used the political upheaval of the Norman invasion to acquire significant land and status. This establishes the Malfoys early as collaborators rather than rebels, a trait that persists. Generations later, the family produces Abraxas Malfoy, a powerful wizard with strong ministry connections. Abraxas is known for manipulating political influence rather than overt ideology. He marries an unnamed pureblood witch and has one confirmed son, Lucius Malfoy. Lucius Malfoy attends Hogwarts, is sorted into Slytherin, to no one's surprise, and later becomes a prominent Death Eater during the First Wizarding War. Lucius and Narcissa's marriage directly merged the Malfoy line with the Black family. This marriage is politically perfect. Ancient blood, no ideological rebellion, and strong social standing. Plus, they weren't cousins, which is a major bonus. Lucius and Narcissa have only one child, Draco Malfoy. Draco is raised explicitly to value blood purity, status, and obedience to power, though he consistently lacks the conviction required to follow that ideology to its logical end. The Tonks family exists because one member of the Black family does what no one else successfully manages. She leaves and does not come back. The line begins with Andromeda Black, the middle daughter of Cygnus Black II and Drella Rosier. Andromeda is raised in the same environment as her sisters, Bellatrix Black and Narcissa Black, but rejects the family's pureblood ideology outright. Andromeda marries Ted Tonks, a Muggle-born wizard. This marriage results in Andromeda being permanently disowned and burned off the Black family tapestry. Unlike other disowned Blacks, she never attempts reconciliation and never re-enters the family structure. Andromeda and Ted have one child, Nymphadora Tonks. Nymphadora is a metamorph magus, an extremely rare magical trait that allows her to change her appearance at will. This ability is genetic, though no previous Black family member is recorded as having it, suggesting a rare mutation rather than inheritance from a known ancestor. Must be those magichlorians at work. Nymphadora Tonks joins the Ministry of Magic as an Auror, and later becomes a member of the Order of the Phoenix. She marries Remus Lupin, a werewolf and close friend of James Potter and Sirius Black. This marriage further distances the family from traditional pure-blood expectations. Despite the implications of a name like Nymphadora, Tonks and Lupin have only one child, a son, Edward Remus Lupin, known as Teddy Lupin. Teddy inherits his mother's metamorph magus abilities, but does not inherit lycanthropy from his father. Both of Teddy's parents are killed during the Battle of Hogwarts. After the war, Andromeda Tonks becomes Teddy's primary guardian. This makes her the final surviving adult representative of the Black bloodline who openly rejects its ideology, raising the next generation entirely outside it. The Tonks family line remains small, but it is one of the only branches of the Black family to survive without collapse, imprisonment, or ideological obsession. This completes the Tonks family tree. The Lestrange family is an old pureblood wizarding house with deep roots in both Britain and France. Unlike some families whose notoriety comes from politics or public office, the Lestranges are known almost entirely for unwavering allegiance to dark magic and to Lord Voldemort. The earliest explicitly named members are Rabaston Lestrange and Rodolphus Lestrange, brothers who both become Death Eaters during the First Wizarding War. Their parents are not named in canon, but the family is repeatedly described as long-established and influential within pureblood circles. Rodolphus Lestrange marries Bellatrix Black, directly linking the Lestrange line to the Black family. This marriage produces no children. The absence of heirs is notable as the marriage is ideologically extreme, but biologically unproductive, a recurring issue in rigid pureblood families. That's not necessarily a bad thing, however. Hitler and Eva Braun didn't have any children either. Just saying. Both Rodolphus and Robaston Lestrange are imprisoned in Azkaban after the First Wizarding War for the torture of Frank and Alice Longbottom. They escape during Voldemort's return and immediately resume active service. Both brothers are later defeated and re-imprisoned. Neither is recorded as having descendants. Bellatrix Lestrange, however, has one child outside her marriage. She gives birth to Delphine, whose father is Lord Voldemort. Delphine is raised in secrecy and has no role in the original 7-book canon, but her existence confirms a biological continuation of both the Lestrange and Gaunt lines. It also confirms that someone had sex with a gross, noseless snake man. Even worse, it was willingly. I hope she at least had a few butterbeers first. Delphine has no children, and her ultimate fate leaves the continuation of the Lestrange bloodline unresolved. With no confirmed legitimate heirs and no surviving named descendants, the Lestrange family effectively disappears as a functioning house. This completes the Lestrange family tree. The Weasley family is an old wizarding line, though deliberately absent from lists like the Sacred 28 due to its open rejection of blood purity ideology. Serves those creepy gingers right. The earliest explicitly named ancestors are not recorded in detail, but the family is consistently described as long established within British magical society. The modern Weasley line begins with Septimus Weasley, who marries Cedrella Black. Cedrella is disowned from the Black family for marrying into the Weasleys, linking the Weasley line directly into the Black bloodline while simultaneously cutting that connection socially. Cedrella's removal from the Black tapestry mirrors Andromeda Black's later fate. Boy, that Black family really got around. Septimus and Cedrella have a son named Arthur Weasley. Arthur works at the Ministry of Magic in the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts office and becomes known for his fascination with Muggle technology rather than ambition or status. Arthur marries Molly Pruitt, uniting the Weasley family with the Pruitt family, another old wizarding line. Molly has two brothers, Fabian Pruitt and Gideon Pruitt, both of whom are members of the original Order of the Phoenix and are killed during the First Wizarding War. Arthur and Molly Weasley have 7 children. Wow, 7 kids? Maybe Molly should have been named Nymphadora instead. The children, in order of birth, are Bill Weasley, Charlie Weasley, Percy Weasley, Fred Weasley, George Weasley, Ron Weasley, and Ginny Weasley. Bill Weasley marries Fleur Delacour, bringing Vila ancestry into the family. They have 3 children, Victoire Weasley, Dominique Weasley, and Louis Weasley. Charlie Weasley does not marry and has no children. Percy Weasley marries Audrey Weasley. They have 2 daughters, Molly Weasley II and Lucy Weasley. Fred Weasley dies during the Battle of Hogwarts without children. George Weasley marries Angelina Johnson, and they have 2 children, Fred Weasley II and Roxanne Weasley. Ron Weasley marries Hermione Granger, a Muggle-born witch. They have 2 children, Rose Granger Weasley and Hugo Granger Weasley. Ginny Weasley marries Harry Potter, directly merging the Weasley line with the Potter line. They have 3 children, James Sirius Potter, Albus Severus Potter, and Lily Luna Potter. This completes the full Weasley-Pruitt family tree, including every named member and all confirmed descendants. The Longbottom family is an old pureblood wizarding line, though far less politically aggressive than families like the Blacks or Lestranges. The earliest named ancestors are not detailed in canon, but the family is firmly established as long-standing and respected within British magical society. At least until that dork Neville Longbottom started nerding his way through the halls of Hogwarts like a bumbling fool. The modern Longbottom line centers on Augusta Longbottom, the matriarch most closely associated with the family. Augusta's husband, unnamed Longbottom grandfather, is never named in canon and dies before the main events of the series. Augusta is the mother of Frank Longbottom. Frank Longbottom marries Alice Longbottom. Both Frank and Alice are talented Aurors and members of the original Order of the Phoenix. Shortly after the fall of Lord Voldemort, they are tortured into insanity by Bellatrix Lestrange, Rodolphus Lestrange, Robaston Lestrange, and Barty Crouch Jr. They survive physically, but are permanently incapacitated and confined to St. Mungo's Hospital. Frank and Alice have 1 child, Neville Longbottom, the dork I mentioned earlier. After his parents' torture, Neville is raised by his grandmother, Augusta Longbottom, who exerts constant pressure on him to live up to the family's reputation. Neville's childhood is marked by repeated attempts by relatives to provoke magical ability, including an incident involving Great Uncle Algy, who accidentally drops Neville from a height, confirming his magic rather brutally. Neville has no siblings. During the events of the series, he eventually outgrows being a dork and grows into a capable and resilient wizard. And as far as the movies are concerned, a total hottie. Following Neville's glow-up, he becomes a key figure in the resistance against Voldemort. After the war, Neville marries Hannah Abbott, a fellow Hogwarts student. No children are named or confirmed for Neville and Hannah in canon. The Longbottom family is also directly tied to the central prophecy. Neville Longbottom is born within the same time frame as Harry Potter and meets all the conditions of the prophecy. Voldemort's decision to target Harry instead is what spares Neville from becoming the focal point of the conflict, though the consequences still devastate his family. This completes the Longbottom family tree. The Crouch family is a small but influential wizarding line that proves the old saying, it's not the size of your lineage that matters, but how you use it. The family is defined less by ancestry and more by rigid devotion to authority and reputation, with predictably catastrophic results. The family is headed by Bartemius Crouch Sr., commonly known as Barty Crouch Sr. He rises to prominence at the Ministry of Magic, eventually becoming head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. During the First Wizarding War, Crouch Sr. becomes known for his hardline policies, including authorizing Aurors to use unforgivable curses like Avada Kedavra and the F word. Publicly, he is seen as principled and incorruptible. Privately, his household is already unstable. Crouch Sr. marries Mrs. Crouch, whose first name is never given in canon. Together, they have one child, Bartemius Crouch Jr., usually referred to as Barty Crouch Jr. From an early age, Barty Jr. grows up under intense pressure to embody his father's ideals of discipline, reputation, and obedience. Despite this, Barty Crouch Jr. becomes a committed Death Eater and is later arrested for joining the torture of the Longbottoms. His trial is held publicly, and Barty Crouch Sr. personally condemns his own son, sending him to Azkaban in an attempt to preserve his public image.
You are no son of mine.
Shortly afterward, Mrs. Crouch becomes terminally ill. She persuades her husband to allow her to use Polyjuice Potion to swap places with their son in Azkaban. Mrs. Crouch dies in prison under her son's name, while Barty Crouch Jr. is smuggled out and kept hidden under the Imperius Curse by his father. Years later, Barty Crouch Jr. escapes his father's control and repays his dad's kindness by murdering him and resuming his service to Lord Voldemort. He impersonates Aleister Moody, using Polyjuice Potion for an entire school year, orchestrating Voldemort's return through the Triwizard Tournament. He is later captured and receives the Dementor's kiss, ending his line permanently. With Barty Crouch Sr. murdered and Barty Crouch Jr. effectively erased, the Crouch family ends entirely. There are no other named relatives, no surviving descendants, and no continuation of the line. This completes the Crouch family tree. The Lovegood family is a small wizarding line with no recorded ties to ancient pureblood houses, political dynasties, or ideological movements. Their significance comes not from lineage size or influence, but from how completely they operate outside mainstream wizarding society. The family begins, in recorded canon, with Xenophilius Lovegood, an eccentric wizard best known as the editor and publisher of The Quibbler. Xenophilius rejects conventional wizarding journalism and instead promotes alternative theories, conspiracies, and fringe magical beliefs. There's no evidence of inherited madness or dark magic in the family. This is a deliberate lifestyle choice to be a weirdo conspiracy theorist. Xenophilius marries Pandora Lovegood, a witch whose curiosity mirrors her husband's, but expresses itself through experimentation rather than publication. Pandora dies when Luna Lovegood is still young, as a result of an experimental spell gone wrong. Her death leaves Luna raised almost entirely by her father, with minimal outside influence. Luna Lovegood is the couple's only child. She attends Hogwarts, is sorted into Ravenclaw, and becomes socially isolated due to her beliefs and mannerisms. Just as much of a weirdo as her dad, Luna often acts as the comic relief, dropping insane claims and non sequiturs unprompted and causing any witch or wizard within hearing distance to do a double take.
I suspect Nargles are behind it.
Despite this, Luna demonstrates consistent magical competence and emotional resilience. She later becomes a member of Dumbledore's army and participates directly in the Battle of Hogwarts. After the war, Luna Lovegood becomes a naturalist and magi-zoologist. She marries Rolf Scamander, the grandson of Newt Scamander, linking the Lovegood family to the Scamander line. Luna and Rolf have two sons, Lorcan Scamander and Lysander Scamander. The marriage and these children represent the only confirmed expansion of the Lovegood line. Unlike many other families, the Lovegoods experience no ideological collapse, no bloodline obsession, and no violent end. The family remains small, self-contained, and entirely unconcerned with how wizarding society views it. This completes the Lovegood family tree. The Scamander family is a wizarding line defined by scholarship, exploration, and restraint, rather than power, politics, or blood status. Unlike many older families, the Scamanders accumulate influence through contribution, not control. The line begins with Newt Scamander, a magi-zoologist educated at Hogwarts and later expelled after endangering a human life with a magical creature. Despite this, Newt goes on to author Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, a textbook used at Hogwarts for generations. His work earns him respect across the wizarding world without placing him in political power. Newt Scamander marries Porpentina Goldstein, a skilled Auror. Porpentina has a sister, Queenie Goldstein, who later marries Jacob Kowalski. A no-match, though this does not directly affect the Scamander bloodline itself. Newt and Porpentina have at least one child, whose name is apparently not important enough to be recorded in canon. This unnamed child later becomes the parent of Rolf Scamander, making Rolf the confirmed grandson of Newt Scamander. Rolf follows in his father's footsteps as a magi zoologist and naturalist, continuing the family's academic focus on exotic critters. The Scamander family is notable for what it avoids. No recorded members pursue ministry dominance, pureblood supremacy, or dark magic. Although whether this is an ideological choice, or because the family is too busy chasing after nifflers and bowtruckles, is anybody's guess. Regardless, the Scamander line remains intact across generations, precisely because it never attempts to elevate itself above the wider wizarding world. This completes the Scamander family tree. By the end of the Harry Potter story, the fighting is over, but the family lines are only just beginning. Harry Potter's life after the war does not slow down. It consolidates power. He joins the Auror office immediately after the Battle of Hogwarts, working under Kingsley Shacklebolt as the ministry tries to rebuild itself into something less corrupt than before. Alongside Ron Weasley, Harry helps modernize the Auror department, stripping out old practices that had failed during Voldemort's rise. By the time his children are at Hogwarts, Harry is no longer just catching dark wizards. He becomes head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, effectively overseeing magical policing across Britain. He spends less time at home than he would like. This becomes relevant later. Ginny Weasley's post-war path goes in the opposite direction. She does not enter government. Instead, she becomes a professional Quidditch player, joining the Holyhead Harpies as a chaser. After ditching the snitch, she moves into journalism, eventually becoming editor of the Daily Prophet's sports section. In other words, one parent enforces the law, the other controls the narrative. A healthy household dynamic. Somehow, between police work and sports stardom, Harry and Ginny find the time to have 3 children. James Sirius Potter is the eldest and most boring Potter offspring. By the time of the Deathly Hallows epilogue, he is already at Hogwarts. He is sorted into Gryffindor, yawn, and behaves exactly as expected. James is loud and confident and enjoys tormenting his younger siblings, especially baby brother Albus. Canon material presents him as a spiritual successor to James Potter and Sirius Black combined, hence the name, with none of the subtlety and all of the confidence. He appears publicly at the Quidditch World Cup and is treated as part of Wizarding Society's inner circle from an early age. No official material describes his adult career, relationships, or children, but his personality is clearly established early. Popular, mischievous, and completely comfortable with his surname. Albus Severus Potter is the middle child and the emotional center of the next generation. He begins Hogwarts in 2017 and immediately diverges from expectations. On the train, instead of bonding with Rose Granger Weasley as planned, he befriends fellow misfit Scorpius Malfoy. At the sorting ceremony, Albus is placed into Slytherin, ending the Potter-Gryffindor streak in front of the entire school. This decision defines his early Hogwarts years. He struggles under the weight of his father's legacy, faces bullying for his house placement, and grows increasingly distant from Harry, who does not understand him particularly well. During his 4th year, Albus becomes involved in a time travel plot after overhearing Harry refuse to help Amos Diggory. With Scorpius Malfoy and a girl named Delphi, he attempts to change the past using a stolen time turner. Before you can say, "Holy multiverse, Batman!" their actions fracture reality into multiple alternate timelines, including one where Voldemort wins the war and Harry dies. In that altered world, Scorpius is forced to fix history almost alone. Eventually, Delphi is revealed to be Voldemort's secret daughter with Bellatrix Lestrange, and the original timeline is restored. Just the idea of Voldemort having a child with anyone, let alone playing hide the wand with Bellatrix Lestrange, is so foul you should be angry that I just put the picture in your head. The experience forces Harry and Albus to confront their fractured relationship and begin repairing it. When this arc ends, Albus is still a student. No future career or family details are provided beyond this point. Lily Luna Potter is the youngest. In the epilogue, she is still pre-Hogwarts and openly jealous of her brothers. Later material confirms she is eventually sorted into Gryffindor. She appears briefly in cursed child-related material, but does not receive a narrative arc. Her role is simple and deliberate. She represents the continuation of the Potter name without the burden placed on Albus. As of all official material, Harry and Ginny have no confirmed grandchildren. Their family tree currently ends with their 3 children, all of whom are positioned very differently within the wizarding world they inherit. Ron Weasley's post-war life begins alongside Harry's, but it does not stay there for long. Immediately after the war, Ron joins the Auror Office, working with Harry during the Ministry's early reform period. After roughly 2 years, he leaves law enforcement entirely.
And your mother! And you're all a bunch of pigs!
Ron's exit is not framed as failure or burnout. It is practical. Practical jokes, that is. He joins George Weasley at Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, helping turn the joke shop into one of the most profitable businesses in Diagon Alley. Ron becomes wealthy without ever holding real authority, which suits him perfectly. Hermione Granger moves in the opposite direction. She enters the Ministry at the lowest professional level, working in the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. From there, she systematically rewrites outdated legislation while continuing the work she started with SPEW, Society for the Promotion of Elfish Welfare, by improving the living conditions of house elves and other sentient non-humans. She later transfers into the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, where she dismantles the remaining pro-pureblood laws from within. By the mid-20s, she had worked her way up to deputy head of the department. By the time of Cursed Child, she has become Minister for Magic. Unlike Harry, Hermione never leaves the system, but rebuilds it and runs it like the bossy know-it-all she is. Between all of Hermione's gatekeeping, girl-bossing, and gaslighting, and Ron's gags, grins, and guffaws, the couple manages to produce 2 children. Rose Granger Weasley is the elder. She starts Hogwarts in 2017, the same year as Albus Potter and Scorpius Malfoy. She is sorted into Gryffindor and immediately establishes herself as high-achieving, competitive, and socially strategic, much like her mother. On the Hogwarts Express, she attempts to plan her friendships in advance, clearly assuming that she and Albus will move through school together. When Albus chooses Scorpius instead, Rose drops him like a bad habit. Academically, she mirrors Hermione. In her second year, she joins the Gryffindor Quidditch team as a chaser and is introduced by McGonagall as your superb new chaser, which is Hogwarts shorthand for she's already terrifying. During the events of Cursed Child, she remains judgmental, driven, and largely unimpressed by Scorpius, despite his obvious crush on her. Hugo Granger Weasley is the younger child. He appears in the Deathly Hallows epilogue, and later at the Quidditch World Cup, where Rita Skeeter notes his resemblance to Hermione. Beyond that, he's effectively a blank slate. No Hogwarts house, personality traits, or future paths are defined. We don't even know if he inherits the Weasleys' signature ginger hair, or even if he has hair at all for that matter. This makes him the least documented member of the immediate Weasley Granger line, which is impressive considering his parents. Ron and Hermione have no confirmed grandchildren. Their family line currently stops with Rose and Hugo, one child already positioned for influence, and the other left entirely undefined, which, in wizarding terms, just means J.K. Rowling hasn't pulled his story out of her butt for a tweet yet. Arthur and Molly Weasley's legacy does not come from political power or dramatic destiny. It comes from volume. When you breed like rabbits, your bloodline is bound to spread. By the post-war period, their family becomes the single most widespread bloodline in modern wizarding Britain. This is not speculation. By the time of the Deathly Hallows epilogue and the Quidditch World Cup coverage, their grandchildren are already scattered across Hogwarts, Diagon Alley, and the Ministry's future talent pool. Bill Weasley and Fleur Delacour form the first major branch. They have 3 children, Victoire, Dominique, and Louis Weasley. Victoire is the oldest, born on the anniversary of the Battle of Hogwarts. By the time of the Quidditch World Cup, she is publicly involved with Teddy Lupin, to the visible discomfort of several adults and the visible delight of Rita Skeeter. Dominique and Louis are younger and largely unexamined, but their existence firmly establishes the Delacour-Weasley line as socially prominent and well-connected. Charlie Weasley never marries and never has children. He continues working with dragons abroad, which means this branch of the Weasley line simply ends with him. Given Charlie's personality, this appears intentional rather than tragic. Rumor has it there might be a half-human, half-dragon child out there with bright red hair, but I'm sure that's completely unrelated to why Charlie never married. Percy Weasley marries a woman named Audrey. Together, they have 2 daughters, Molly Weasley II and Lucy Weasley. Percy returns fully to ministry life after the war and rises steadily through the ranks. While his daughters are named, their school lives and careers are not described, which fits Percy's general trajectory. Stable, respectable, and quietly bureaucratic. George Weasley marries Angelina Johnson, his and Fred's former Gryffindor Quidditch teammate. They have 2 children, Fred Weasley II, named after George's deceased twin, and Roxanne Weasley, not named after George's deceased twin. George continues running Weasley's Wizard Wheezes, with Ron later joining him. The business becomes a major commercial success, turning the family's chaotic humor into sustained economic power. With Harry and Ginny's and Ron and Hermione's kids in the picture, Arthur and Molly have at least a dozen confirmed grandchildren. By the next generation, the Weasley name is embedded in nearly every major social structure of the wizarding world, from commerce to education to government. Like I said, rabbits. The Malfoy family survives the war, but it does not emerge unchanged. Draco Malfoy marries Astoria Greengrass after Hogwarts. Astoria comes from a pure-blood family, but rejects the ideology that once defined the Malfoy name. She carries a blood malediction, a hereditary curse that resurfaces in her generation, leaving her physically frail and shortening her life. Draco initially fears having children because pregnancy could worsen her condition. Astoria insists anyway, not for legacy or blood status, but simply because she wants a family. That, and I'm sure living alone with Draco Malfoy, can't be very fun. They have one son, Scorpius Hyperion Malfoy. Scorpius Hyperion? What, was megalomaniacal supervillain Malfoy already taken? Astoria raises Scorpius deliberately differently from how Draco was raised. She teaches him tolerance towards muggles and rejects pureblood superiority, a stance that causes tension with Lucius and Narcissa Malfoy. Family gatherings are described as uncomfortable at best and more awkward than Thanksgiving with your MAGA uncle and liberal cousins at worst. Astoria dies in the summer before Scorpius' third year at Hogwarts, leaving Draco to raise their son alone. Draco's later life is quieter than expected. He remains independently wealthy and largely withdrawn from public power. In Cursed Child, he is no longer driven by ideology or ambition. His defining concern is Scorpius. Regret replaces arrogance. Silence replaces posturing. Scorpius begins Hogwarts in 2017, the same year as Albus Potter and Rose Granger Weasley. He is sorted into Slytherin alongside Albus. Almost immediately, rumors spread that Scorpius is secretly Voldemort's son, based on fabricated time travel conspiracies linked to his birth year and, the fact he was born without a nose. The result is severe bullying and social isolation. Unlike his father, Scorpius responds with humor, intelligence, and restraint. He becomes Albus Potter's closest friend, effectively dismantling the Potter-Malfoy feud. When Albus decides to alter the past using a stolen time turner, Scorpius follows him into the plan. After their first interference with history, Scorpius returns alone to an alternate reality where Voldemort won the war and Harry died. In that timeline, Scorpius is celebrated as a dark figure, while Draco holds power. Scorpius rejects it entirely, and works with alternate versions of Snape, Ron, and Hermione to restore the original timeline. When history is repaired, Scorpius chooses to re-engage with school life. He considers joining the Slytherin Quidditch team. He awkwardly asks Rose Granger Weasley out. He begins, cautiously, to exist rather than endure. As of all official material, the Malfoy line ends with Scorpius. No children, no further descendants, and no extension beyond him are described. The family survives, but its future is deliberately unresolved. As we know, Remus Lupin and Nymphadora Tonks did not get a long future together. They don't even make it out of the last book alive. But they do get a child. Their son, Edward Remus, or Teddy Lupin, was born shortly before the Battle of Hogwarts. Teddy is left orphaned before he is old enough to remember his parents. This makes him one of the few next-generation characters whose life is shaped entirely by the aftermath of the war, rather than the war itself. Teddy is raised by his grandmother, Andromeda Tonks. Unlike Neville Longbottom's isolated childhood, Teddy grows up surrounded by support. Harry Potter becomes his godfather, and the Weasley and Potter families function as an extended safety net. He grows up in homes where grief is understood and not avoided. This matters later. Like his mother, Teddy is a metamorph magus, able to change his appearance at will. Unlike his father, he is not a werewolf. His magical inheritance skips the curse and keeps the gift, which is about as kind as wizarding genetics ever gets. At Hogwarts, Teddy is sorted into Hufflepuff. In his final year, he becomes head boy, which doesn't mean what you think it does, sicko. Get your head out of the gutter. Rowling later notes that Teddy, as head boy, is mildly disappointed when James Sirius Potter is sorted into Gryffindor rather than Hufflepuff, establishing him as an older, slightly exasperated mentor figure to Harry's children rather than a distant legend. By the time of the Deathly Hallows epilogue, Teddy is 19 and a frequent presence in the Potter household. James casually reports seeing him snogging Victoire on the Hogwarts Express platform. This relationship continues openly and publicly. At the Quidditch World Cup, Teddy and Victoire Weasley are inseparable, to the visible irritation of Rita Skeeter and the resigned acceptance of everyone else. The relationship quietly links two war-scarred families together, the orphaned son of fallen heroes and the eldest child of Bill and Fleur Weasley. No marriage or children are described, but the pairing is treated as long-term and stable. Beyond this, Teddy's adult career is not specified. He exists less as a future profession and more as a connective figure, binding together the Lupin, Tonks, Potter, and Weasley legacies into a single extended family that carried the emotional memory of the war forward. Neville Longbottom survives the war and finally becomes who he was always supposed to be, a grade A hunk. Rawr. After Hogwarts, Neville marries Hannah Abbott, a fellow member of Dumbledore's army. Hannah does not pursue power or prestige. She becomes the landlady of the Leaky Cauldron, placing her at the literal crossroads of Wizarding Britain. Neville lives with her in the rooms above the pub, which is about as symbolically neat as the story ever gets. Neville's professional life stabilizes quickly. He returns to Hogwarts as the herbology professor, a role that fits him perfectly. By the time Harry's children attend school, Neville is an established member of the staff, teaching the next generation rather than shaping policy or cutting off giant snakeheads. In Cursed Child, characters refer to him simply as Professor Longbottom, which is the clearest possible signal that he has fully stepped into adulthood and authority. Hannah later retrains as a healer, with references suggesting she applies for the position of Hogwarts matron. Whether she ever formally takes the role is not detailed, but the intent is clear. Both halves of the marriage orient themselves around care, education, and maintenance rather than ambition. Unlike many other post-war couples, Neville and Hannah's family tree does not extend downward. No children are mentioned. Their legacy is not genetic, it is institutional. Neville helps rebuild Hogwarts not as a battlefield or a refuge, but as a functioning school again. He teaches the children of Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Ginny. He becomes part of the structure that ensures the next generation does not grow up the way his own did. Their line ends quietly, which feels appropriate. Neville Longbottom does not pass on a dynasty. He passes on stability. Luna Lovegood does not settle into wizarding society. She expands it. After the war, Luna becomes a magi-zoologist, traveling the world to study magical creatures that most witches and wizards either dismiss or actively avoid. This is not treated as a hobby. Luna gains a professional reputation as a serious naturalist, publishing findings and discovering previously unrecorded species. In short, she turns being odd into being correct. She marries Rolf Scamander, a fellow magi-zoologist and the grandson of Newt Scamander, the wizard famous for writing about fantastic beasts and where you can find them. The pairing links Luna directly to the Fantastic Beasts lineage without changing her personality or trajectory. Their marriage is based on shared work rather than domestic stability, and their family life reflects that. Luna and Rolf have twin sons, Lorne Michaels and Lysol Scamander. Sorry, I mean Lorcan and Lysander Scamander. By the time of the Quidditch World Cup, the twins are old enough to be left at home with Xenophilius Lovegood. Rita Skeeter, predictably, implies that this is because the children are too disturbed to be seen in public, which confirms very little except that they exist, are not infants, and are already being judged by association. No official material describes which houses Lorcan and Lysander are sorted into, what subjects they excel at, or whether they resemble their mother's eccentricity or their father's uncanny resemblance to Eddie Redmayne. What is clear is their position in the wider family map. Through Luna, they are loosely connected to the Potter-Weasley network. Through Rolf, they inherit the Scamander legacy of exploration and documentation rather than governance or fame. This branch of the family tree grows sideways rather than upward. It does not produce ministers, aurors, or war heroes. It produces observers. Given the state of the wizarding world, that may be the more useful role. Some post-war figures do not build families, but they still shape the environment every future family grows up inside. Cho Chang survives both her borderline problematic name and the Second Wizarding War and quietly exits the center of wizarding society. She later marries a Muggle, stepping away from the insular patterns that defined earlier pureblood and half-blood family trees. No children or professional details are attached to her later life. Her role in the future wizarding world is indirect, but significant. She represents a generation that chooses integration over legacy, and does so without ceremony. Kingsley Shacklebolt, nothing borderline about this one, becomes Minister for Magic after the war. His leadership marks the first genuine institutional reset the ministry ever experiences. He oversees the reform of the Auror Office, recruiting Harry, Ron, and Hermione into their positions, and dismantles structures that allowed Voldemort's rise in the first place. Namely, by getting rid of the giant sign in front of the ministry that reads, "Evil supervillain hellbent on exterminating Muggles wanted. No noses or hair required." No family, partner, or descendants are mentioned. If you want to understand why these future families end up the way they do, you have to go backwards, not forwards. Every rivalry, marriage, alliance, and dead-end line traces straight back to choices made decades earlier. By pure-blood dynasties, forgotten houses, and families already collapsing long before Harry was born. So next, we're rewinding the entire map. Every family tree in Harry Potter explained.